Trump has now come out to announce 35% tariffs on Canada. Trump warns of higher tariffs if Canada retaliates.
Montana farmers are voicing frustrations over the Trump administration.
Imagine waking up to news reports claiming that a 35% tax on Canadian goods has just been imposed by the United States. Isn't it just another standard trade dispute? This one isn't typical, though. It's intimate. On both sides of the border, it's about families, factories, and farmers. It also tells the story of a conflict that began with something as commonplace as milk, but escalated into a brawl. It has the potential to completely transform the economy of North America. It all started on August 1st, when Donald Trump announced a 35% duty on imports from Canada. The message was very clear in Washington. To ensure that America always won, regardless of who else paid the price, the White House sought to rewrite trade regulations. Canada, however, has no intention of complying. Ottawa stood shoulder to shoulder with its farmers and industry, refusing to back down and ending negotiations. And this is where the fissures first appeared. Right here in America, not in Canada. Barns in Montana fell silent. Suddenly, farmers who had long relied on consistent sales over the border were left with tanks full of milk and no place to ship it. Bills mounted, prices fell, and the annoyance became more audible. Trump supporters were now witnessing the loss of their livelihoods after casting their ballots in the hopes of stability. However, why dairy? Of all things, why attack cheese, butter, and milk? The dairy supply arrangement in Canada seemed unfair to Washington, an imperceptible barrier that restricted imports and prevented American farmers from participating. However, it wasn't a wall to Canada. It served as a shield, a system intended to ensure a fair income, prevent the turmoil of overt output, and preserve small family farms. Dairy defense was not an economic issue for Canadians. It was a matter of survival. It concerned sovereignty. Ottawa therefore drew a red line when Trump attempted to use tariffs as leverage. No negotiating leverage, no compromise. Even a statute prohibiting future governments from abandoning supply management in trade negotiations was passed by Parliament. They took it very seriously. However, the majority of Americans were unaware of this twist. Trump asserted that Canada was imposing 275% or possibly 300% tariffs on U.S. dairy products. The USMCA, the trade agreement that Trump's own first administration signed, actually permits tens of thousands of tons of U.S. milk to enter Canada with no duties. Furthermore, America has yet to meet even half of that quota. Only after the quota is reached do such exorbitant figures become applicable. To put it another way, the tariffs Trump criticized weren't even in place, but the political battle had already started. Tariffs are also not confined to a single lane. What began as a dairy conflict swiftly expanded to include autos, steel, and aluminum. At that point, it was hard to overlook the harm. Consider Detroit, Ford, General Motors, Stellantis, businesses that reside in cross-border supply chains. Every Michigan-built automobile is dependent on dozens of Canadian-made parts. Costs skyrocketed when tariffs on some materials rose to 50%. In a single quarter, General Motors lost $1 billion. In just 6 months, Stellantis lost $2.7 billion. Analysts didn't even want to discuss Ford's poor financial results. Allowed. Additionally, some autos' prices increased by up to $9,000 for consumers. This is all the result of a trade war that started over milk. Canada was not collapsing in the meantime. Ottawa took a long-term approach rather than a quick fix. They secured new agreements with Asia and Europe. They provided incentives to their enterprises and farmers. No neighborhood was left behind thanks to their efforts. Additionally, Canadian manufacturers were opening up new markets abroad while American farmers were left with barns full of unsold goods. A paradox exists. Trump's approach was to use forceful blows to make opponents yield and declare victory. And that did work sometimes. South Japan. To minimize suffering, Korea, and even some European countries made a deal. However, Canada said no. Additionally, the tariffs began to rebound. affecting American companies more severely than Canadian ones because of how closely their economies are tied to ours. Here's why this story goes beyond dairy. Blocks of cheese or cartons of milk aren't exactly the point. It concerns the U.S.'s ability to deploy tariffs as a weapon and the willingness of allies to accept it without retaliating. The world is keeping an eye on Canada's rejection. Notes are being taken by friends. Rivals are taking advantage of the gaps. And amidst all of this, American auto workers and farmers are posing a straightforward query. Are we being destroyed by tariffs, or are they safeguarding us? And we're at that point right now. Both neighbors are unwilling to blink and are caught in a standoff. On one side, Trump is wagering that Ottawa will give in under extreme pressure. Canada, on the other hand, is banking that it can weather the storm with the support of new allies overseas and unity at home. Thus, the actual query isn't whether tariffs can raise the cost of vehicles or lower the price of milk. Who breaks? First is the true question. Will pressure cause Canada to crumble? Alternatively, will the cost of a dispute that started over a glass of milk fall on American workers?